So you brought up a couple of texts that a lot of people like to bring up, so let's talk about those texts. After all, it is a valid question. The first one is Genesis 4 verse 10. It says, "Your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground." And then you're asking, was it his soul? We'll get to that. The next one is Revelation 6 verse 10, where it talks about souls pleading for God's vengeance from underneath the altar. So let's look at the story of Cain and Abel. This is the text in question here, Genesis chapter 4 verse 10. God had come to Cain after Cain had murdered his brother. And God says, "What have you done, Cain? What's going on with you? The voice of your brother's blood cries to me from the ground." So the question is, blood can't cry. Was it his soul? No. Let's look at why. Here in Genesis chapter 2 verse 7, we see the formula needed for a soul to exist. There are two things. The first is dust. The second is the breath of life. When God formed Adam out of the dust or the clay of the ground, then he breathed into Adam's nostrils the breath of life. And that is why it says, man became a living soul. If you look up that word soul, it means creature or being. When Adam was brought to life, he did not receive a creature or being separate from his body. He didn't receive a soul separate from his body either, because they're all the same thing. Soul, creature, being, same thing. Now, a lot of people point to this text as well. They read this literally instead of reading Revelation symbolically, prophetically, as they should. Many, many things within the book of Revelation are written disguised with symbols. Now, Ecclesiastes chapter 9 verses 5 and 6 says the dead know nothing. And Ecclesiastes 12 verse 7 says that when a person dies, their body returns to the dust of the earth, the breath of life goes back to God. There is no soul that goes to heaven. So this right here is symbolic. The church was going through many centuries of hard persecution. And here God was letting the church know he's going to take care of it. Not in our time frame, but he will take care of it. As verse 11 says, there are certain things that have to happen first, and then God will exact vengeance on the wicked who have persecuted his church. So when the Bible speaks of the blood of Abel crying out, or souls under an altar crying out, it's speaking in symbols. Have you ever heard the phrase, silence is deafening? Or have you ever used the phrase regarding somebody's actions? What that says to me, Abel's blood being spilled on the ground was presenting a message to God. God had seen that Cain had murdered his brother. That was the message. And God was telling Cain, look, if you don't repent, you're going to have a hard time. So when we read texts like this, we have to understand the symbolism of them. Because when we study these texts, we see that there is no such thing as an immortal soul. Nobody can speak once they're dead.